Hi, welcome back to another video.
In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a 3D print look like real metal. And one of the most important things in this process is to make the 3D print smooth. So let's talk about a 3D print. What we're doing is we've got a lot of layers of plastic that are all stacked on top of each other. So let's turn it on its side and look at it close up. All of these stacks of plastic are bumps with these little grooves in between each, and you can see and feel that. In order for it to be smooth, we have to make it all flat, and there's a few ways that we can do that. The first thing is to sand down the whole top until we reach the bottom of those valleys, and then the whole surface will be smooth. But that is a lot of sanding, especially with PLA. It takes a lot of time to get that smooth. Another approach is to fill all of the gaps instead and bring the level up to the highest point, and that would also make it smooth. A popular approach to this is using sandable filler primer. You can spray a layer on, then you just sand the highest points down to the tops of the plastic, the peaks, and then you just do another layer, do the same thing, and you just do it as many times as you need to fill it in. And this works pretty good, but sometimes I find that it struggles to fill in the little gaps. So I'm going to show you another process where you can use Bondo that's diluted that will just fill in all of those gaps. Then you can sand it down and get a nice smooth surface. Now the reality is that when you sand it down, you go a little bit into the gaps, so you can top it off with a layer of the filler sander primer and sand it, and you'll have a nice smooth surface. So let's see how it looks in real life. I should say from the beginning that it's important that you get a good 3D print, so learn how to use your printer and how to position your print correctly so that you get the thinnest layer lines possible. For this hat, this angle worked better. For this project, I'm actually making this bust of Wild Bill. And this is a sculpture that was sculpted by my friend Lou Hamalage. I'll put a link to his Instagram down in the description below so you can check him out. But he sculpted this, and I printed it out, and I printed it in a couple of different sizes. So you're going to see these smaller blue ones and a much bigger pink one. So let's get this thing smooth. To start, we're going to be using Bondo glazing and spot putty. This is it's the consistency of like paint, or like acrylic paint. We're going to squeeze some into a little glass bowl and add some acetone to it, stir it up, and it's going to turn into a very thin fluid. Now we can just paint this fluid over the surface, and it's thin enough that it will fall into all of those gaps in between. Now I tried a few different things. In this case, I tried spraying it with the primer first, but I found that ultimately it's best to just go directly onto the 3D print like this and fill it in. And you might have to do a couple of layers, a couple of coats with this, but you don't have to be clean. You can put it on there. It sinks down a little bit as the acetone dries, and so that's why a second coat really helps a lot to fill in those gaps. And then we sand it, and I used some wet sandpaper. I started with 220 grit is what I was sanding this down. And then you just kind of wipe it off with a clean paper towel to get all of the slurry off of it. At this point, it's ready to be primed, but after priming, I'll take it all the way up to 1,000 grit. When we're working on the face, I made some little sanders using sticks. There's a short on my channel if you want to see how I made those, but it helped me sand into all of the little gaps. And this is the bigger one that I'm making. It's a heck of a lot easier to sand something that's this big compared to the smaller one. So this is the primer that I use. It's 2-in-1 filler and sandable primer. And I just spray that over top, after sanding it, and then go back through and sand it again. Now both the Bondo and the primer sand very easily, so you're not spending hours sanding this down. Even though you're doing multiple sandings, it's quick. And I just rub it all off with the paper towel when I'm done, and it's really hard to tell if it's smooth because you can see some Bondo, you can see some of the blue plastic, and of course you can see the gray primer. Here's a trick to know if it's smooth. Do you hear that? It sounds like a zipper. That's not smooth. This one does not sound like a zipper because it's very smooth. Another thing you can do is just wet the surface a little bit and tilt it so that you can see the light reflection. If it's smooth, it'll be just a even flat reflection. But if you look here over on the side, you can kind of see the layer lines. Also, I'm checking the forehead, looking for layer lines, and it looks pretty smooth, so this is a good indicator. So here's where I ended up. This is completely smooth on all of the parts, and the bigger one also. I'm not going to cover it with another layer of primer. This is just where we're going to be. So now let's paint it. So for this process, we're going to need some rub and buff. If you're not familiar with rub and buff, it is kind of a metallic wax that you can rub onto things, and it makes them feel like metal. And it's excellent, but it's also very expensive. Sometimes, $12 or more for a little tube. And it doesn't come in very many colors, so sometimes you can't find the colors you need. For the process we're doing today, we're going to need 2 colors at least. And I'm going to show you a way to make it yourself for cheap and make it exactly the colors that you want. And the things that we're going to need are first some parchment paper, some palette knives, some mica powder of the colors that you want. This is the same stuff you would use for resin or soap. And then a clear paste wax with carnauba wax in it, or clear shoe polish works too. What we're going to do is just scoop out some of that paste wax and make a big glob of it, and then add a bunch of the mica powder of the colors that you want. You end up adding quite a bit more mica powder than you would for, say, resin. And you just mush it around, and as you're working it, you're actually melting the wax, and you'll feel it get considerably softer as it goes. One of the cool things about paste wax, with carnauba wax especially, is that when it hardens after you use it, it really hardens into kind of a tough shell. But while we're working it here, it's soft, and we'll just mix it all up and then store it in a little container. And I found some at the dollar store. So we'll just scoop that in and save it. And this will last forever, or until you use it all. And so we made this one that's kind of a dark bronze color. And let's get a bright gold going here and mix that together. And I found, to be honest, that I could have added a little bit more pigment into that gold to make it even better. I'm going to make a metallic brown, and we'll try out this glitter gold and see how that works as well. I don't know that I'm going to need all of these, but I will at least have them for any time I do want to use them. Now with those made, we'll set them aside, and it's time to spray paint. I'm going to use this dark bronze spray paint. It's also got a hammered finish. The hammered finish is not necessary, but it does add a little bit of interest because you get a little bit of extra color in it. And this is what it looks like when it's all dry. So right now it looks like plastic that's been painted with metallic paint, and we want it to look like actual bronze. So the first step is to take our dark bronze rub and buff and a clean cloth. We'll get some on there, and then we're going to gently rub it over the surface. Now for this one, we're using this as a transition. You can see it's lighter than the base coat. We're actually going to rub this in pretty hard and get down into some of the gaps, but not all of the way. So you can see the difference. The big one hasn't gotten that yet. And we're going to set it aside and let it dry, or let it freeze up, and then come back and buff it just with a brand new clean cloth, I'm just going to rub it and it will bring out the shine. Now we're going to add some highlights with the bright gold. And for this one, we're doing the exact same thing, but I'm doing it much more gently. I only want this on the very highest points. So we'll just rub it on there real gently. And I'll show you, you can see the difference here. Again, the little one has it and the big one doesn't. To illustrate it a little bit better here, only half of the big one has it. His left side, so it's screen right side, has the gold. The other side doesn't yet. Again, we'll let it sit for a little bit to harden up and then come back and buff it with a soft cloth. And that's all there is. So let's take a look at the final result. I'm really pleased with the way that this turned out. I'm using them as trophies for a poker tournament, and they really do look like they are bronze busts instead of just plastic painted with a metallic paint. And I learned a lot about the most efficient way to make PLA prints smooth. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like this, please make sure to leave a thumbs up so that YouTube knows other people might also want to watch it. Also, please subscribe if you'd like to catch my future videos. I have a lot of things planned in the future. Got some spooky Halloween stuff coming up. So, hit the bell too if you want to be notified. Until next time, though, don't be bored, be creative.